So I would like to invite our colleagues from Wyandotte County, as well as Sheena and Denise from Omaha, to join us back on stage. We have about 15 minutes for questions. So please think of questions that you'd like to ask folks, but I'll kick it off, and I want to go back to the question that Wesley posed to the panel when he was talking, and it's that idea of getting to yes. In this work, all of us are working through partnerships, and we've heard a lot about that in the last couple of days. Partnerships can go awesome, but sometimes maybe they don't go the way that we were anticipating. So I think it'd be really great to hear from you all talk about how do you manage expectations, how do you align goals, and that whole overarching, how do you keep momentum when you are working on some of these projects and when a lot of time and effort goes into these projects and they just don't happen overnight. So whoever would like to start. I know that's a really big one.
It takes a second. Okay, so I have had some of those problems, just talking with the garden program, being very clear with the director of the Nothing But Net program that I only wanted this many kids and this age, and then, they all just show up. I think it's just being very direct and clear about what you need, but it's also being realistic. The community we serve, sometimes things just don't go as planned. Sometimes we don't know what the barriers and issues are. So trying to be flexible and just always trying to stay positive and looking at all the good things that are happening with it instead of always focusing on the bad. I think you need to keep in mind where the problems lie and what you can possibly do in the future. So I think every time I teach a class, something's changed a little bit. I change it up a little bit just to make it easier for everybody involved. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what I do.
I'll just talk about a tool that I use to do these things. So I'm not paid by this company at all, but Top Facilitation Methods has training that you can go through on building consensus, so setting the expectations together, along with tools and workshops related to strategic planning, but then also the secrets of implementation. So how to keep that momentum going, how to incorporate the things you've already decided and do checkup and rerouting as needed throughout the process. So for me, that's been great because with a steering committee of about 14 organizations, I need tools in my pocket that I've been trained on to incorporate into the meeting setting.
I would just add that, like in the frustrating work around the levee trails, I think the great thing is having a network of people who are working on similar projects, like our infrastructure action team really works on policy and setting goals, and to know that that group is working in concert with our efforts, the levee trail, that's really encouraging, and I think it keeps us moving forward incrementally at least.
And I don't know if this answered your question as well, but working with the coalition, part of the work that I was tasked to do, it was to continue building partnership. And I didn't have a book to follow, but thinking about all of the health disparities in our county and being such a diverse community, it was easy for me to look at those others that were focusing on reducing and getting better health outcomes in the community. So all of the partners have been very stable and continually working as partners. I know I only presented about one specific point, but like Wesley said, I think I like him as a partner because we moved our offices to the health department a year ago. But it's a lot of community organizations working towards the same issues. And even if the branding of the Latino Health for Coalition, it doesn't mean that we only focus or benefit one side of the community. And our coalition is also very diverse, and I get the fun to do the work.
My answer is very brief. With our program, I've been fortunate enough, if you will, a lot of our relationships were already established when I came on board. So I haven't had as much experience with establishing those, but I think just, all of our work intertwines or overlaps at some point or on some level. So I think just when you get in those spaces, presenting what you're there for at some point, we might sit on in a Latino Health for All meeting or an infrastructure action team, and trails is the focus of the meeting, but it's my responsibility to at some point tie that back into safe routes to school for myself and for whoever else may be in the room, just because it's really easy for all of this work to intertwine and just kind of get lost, if you will. So.
Right, and I saw on one of your slides, it really resonated with me, this idea of that delicate balance of and gentle reminders of the motivation, that balance you have to walk.
If I can share that, so when you posed this question, all I could think about was a school specifically that I've had to kind of do that clarification and reset those expectations. I may establish a relationship with the school by going and reading to the students just because they needed volunteers to do that, and sure, why not? And then I may come and be seen as, oh, you're the lady that reads the books. But how many of you do walking school bus, And so having to tie it in to remind even the staff, like they know me, but reminding them like why I'm here, so.
Right, it also reminds me of, Monica, what you do, going into the restaurants and eating over lunch, that building rapport is so important with that.
And I would like to add to the work she does. Like she said, we all are tied some way or another. I'm a parent of 4 boys, so I also used to work in the school district, and I listened to her information, remember how hard it was at the beginning to find those champions in the schools due to the lack of incentives for those teachers that were even with much passion, but really limited time because all of the other things that they have to do.
It's funny, I really appreciated when you were talking about calling Lowe's, calling whoever you needed to do to get the thing done, and then if they didn't give you the answer you want, you're like, okay, fine, and then, and then go on to the next person and see if they can do that. I think something that's like, and it's hard, this is not like a comment about people, it's a comment about me, because you learn a lot about yourself and your own tendencies as you try and work on these projects. And I like to be a friendly person, right? And I like to be friends with people, but it's really not the work among partners, and especially among partners. You're friends, but the point is not to be friends, right? The point of us meeting together in rooms and working together, friends is this great thing that I am with lots of people, but we're there to get something done. And you have to ask people to do things, right? You have to, and if you don't get the response you want, you have to figure out how to deal with that. And sometimes the person you're working with is a partner, and that's an easy conversation, right? Because you're like, hey, I was expecting this thing, and it didn't get done. Why can we work on that? Or looking around the room and you're like, hey, this is too much work for me. Can you do this thing? And there's this process of like asking people to do things, following up with them, and seeing if it gets done or not is like one of the core behaviors that like is part of this work. And for me, sometimes what gets in the way of that, or has in the past, was like, oh, that person's my friend, I don't want to burden them, or I don't want to, this thing. And it's like, well, we're all working in this together, so like, it's okay for me to inconvenience them because I know they're going to inconvenience me later. Because that's just part of the work. And there's also something about, I was thinking about, so sometimes it's really easy with your friends. Sometimes you're talking to people that they're not your friends. They might not even like you. And I was, it's not what you do when you're trying to get supplies for the boxes is not markedly different from what this is Dr. Cole. Is that the?
This morning.
Yes.
Yes.
What happened when he didn't get the response he wanted in Texas from the State Department of Health? He contacted the governor's office, and he ran the physical activity plan from the state to the governor's office. It's the same thing. He contacted the State Department of Health. I mean, I'm not sure how that conversation went, and so I won't put words in his mouth, but it sounds like it was a challenging thing for him, so he said, okay, And he hung that phone up and he picked up another phone and talked to the governor. And so there's like I don't know, there's a forward momentum, there's like a constant requesting and asking and a tolerance for some of the friction that comes with it. I think that's like really important part of the progress for me.
Yeah,
and I've grown in that
I
too.
will add that Lowe's gives me everything at cost every year. So I still have a good relationship with them. And, you know, when you tell them it's for the kids, you know, it just depends on your approach too. But, you know, when you find a good partner, you stick with them. So I go back every year and I say, hey, it's me again. Am I getting everything at cost again? And they say, of course you are. So even though I have grant money, I still want to be responsible with that money. So there you go.
Sure, thank you. Any questions? Well, I do have a question for you, Sheena, and it's really out of curiosity. You said something about Nebraska, not their PE, and not tracking minutes, and not having a way to do that, and that was really surprising to me. So are there barriers to that, and are they going to try to start doing that?
Yeah, so we joke unofficially that Nebraska hates mandates. But we know from our research that policy can have the greatest impact on all types of populations. So it's a struggle with that. We do have some great champions at the state level who are all about that whole child approach and all of the different facets that then lead a child to be a productive learner and productive community member. So, but they can only do so much as well. So we haven't found that perfect recipe for change yet, but we are slowly building momentum at the district's level while also being involved in sort of statewide efforts around this topic so that maybe we can get multiple champions in both places to have those conversations again.
Well, great presentations, everyone. This has been really helpful couple sessions. And I guess my questions are for Sheena and Areiona. Sheena, you mentioned that you had worked with some school districts to update their school wellness policies. And I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that in terms of what changes were made to it and whether the schools were actually adhering to the wellness policies that you helped put in place. And then along that same lines, I was wondering, Areiona, if any schools that you've worked with have made walking school buses like as a part of a formal policy within the school, or whether it's always just kind of on a yearly or semester-wide basis.
So historically, the work that we've done is at the school building level for changes, so incorporating physical activity breaks, brain breaks, teaching around that, and then implementation, and also installing water fountains, getting custodians to accept water bottles in the classrooms. So really, this is our first approach of working with the district to make changes. We've provided technical support, encouragement, sharing of resources in the past, but now we're hoping to actually move to the policy update and then be there with our coalition partners to help then implement and be able to respond at the school building level. So we're really hoping that the school relationships and building changes are getting them to trust us, but then taking it farther with the district. So check back in with me this fall and I'll let you know how it's gone.
Yeah, I was not expecting someone else to be standing there. My answer is about the same. The short answer would be no, not formally. But like I mentioned about Turner School District, having that superintendent's stamp, and then I can walk into a school and expect to have to do the whole spiel. And he says, oh, I know all about you. This is the champion you'll be working with, and you guys can kick off in a couple weeks if you want. It's a totally different dynamic, but it's not formal, if you will. And then from the school side also, you know, we'll be changing superintendents very quickly, so it'll be reestablishing that entire relationship. And then from the city perspective, the UG, there is a certain amount of funding that we're trying to get established for Safe Routes to School. So trying to go that route as far as getting something set in stone, sustainable, knowing that we'll at least have the funding for the sidewalks. Maybe not for me, I'm not employed with the UG, but so like she said, continuing those relationships and building on that. We are creating a pedestrian safety curriculum that we're working on getting on the school level, and the best case scenario would be getting the teachers to incorporate that in their school days like we saw yesterday. So working in that direction, but really just like solidifying those relationships to move that way, yeah.
So I have a comment and a question. First, my comment is just about what great work all this was to hear about, and I think some really good examples of coming at active living and healthy eating from kind of multiple angles, right? And so Live Well Omaha, for example, I thought was a great example of coming at school physical activity using the comprehensive school physical activity model, so hitting it from all angles to really make that maximum impact. So kudos to some of these great examples. So my question, a little more specific, and Sheena, you brought up walk audits. I know several folks up here doing walk audits. Maybe Sheena, I don't know if you can chime in on this, or Areiona or Wesley, or anyone who's doing walk audits. My question is, Sheena, you mentioned that you are collecting the data and using the data in a way that it can be shared with decision makers. So that's something that I think is important, and I hear a lot, or people ask me a lot of, or I hear people talking, how can we best do that? How can we best share that information in a way that's going to be easy for decision makers to see that information, digest the information, and turn it into action? So I know, getting decision makers to care about the information is another thing, but I think it's great to actually, that you're not just collecting it, you're trying to actually use and share that information. So can you say a little bit about how you are compiling and sharing the information? Are you giving them summary data from your walk audit? Did you create a tool? How complex is the tool, and how easy is it for decision makers to kind of see that data and see what might be needed?
I will just say quickly, before referring to the people who have done this longer than I have, we first invite those elected officials and community leaders to participate in the walk audit themselves, so that they can see in action what a cool way this is to just get a bunch of people together that care. And then we're creating the document, but it will be a pretty brief, like one-page summary of the policies, programs, and projects, 3 Ps, that stemmed from debriefing on the walk audits. And hopefully, if we've had those people at the walk audit, like the mayor's staff, and then they get the report, that person's already invested and kind of vouch for us, and we can go back to them and say, hey, what did the mayor think? Or what did your head of public works think? So
That's a great idea. We, at our level of Safe Routes to School, don't directly do those walk audits. We do more of the actual school observations of arrival and dismissal. But we've been connecting with some partners that have been doing those audits, and we want to kind of collaborate, if you will, with that information. So I can't really say what the distribution goal of that will be, but I know for us it will entail showing the need for those sidewalk improvements. And then not only that, but in this specific case of this area, showing why that matters, connecting the elementary school with the middle school, because they just connect. So I'm not really sure what we'll be doing or what they will be doing with that information, but yeah, we're hoping to build from it.
I don't have anything to add.
Well, I want to thank everyone for your great questions, and I also want to thank our speakers for the great information that you provided. It was really great to hear about your communities, and if everyone would stand up and join me in thanking our speakers, and we'll roll into... I'll hand it over to Robin, and he'll close out our session.
Wow, what a great couple days of speakers and presentations. It's great to hear about the things that are happening locally, things that are happening regionally, things that are happening nationally, and things that are happening internationally. It's been, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. We don't really have a big formal wrap-up plan, but I just thought I would give just a couple thoughts things that we've heard over and over again, and I think it was really highlighted with some data from the work from the KU Community Development people, Dr. Collier-Akers and Dr. Fawcett. You know, they had data that really showed that the things that matter are things that are high intensity, and so that's things that will last and have a big reach. Other things that were important is that there were multiple things going on. I believe they said the magic number that they found were 6 or 7 of their policies and programs that were in place. And engaging multiple stakeholders is where you actually started to see a benefit for childhood obesity. It was amazing that they saw differences of 1 BMI unit from communities who are doing the least to those that were doing the most. And if we could get that type of population level change in body weight or in BMI, that would be simply amazing. The other thing that I really took from Dr. Salas's presentation was what we need to try to do is to create opportunities for people to become more active and to eat better, and then also to provide them to opportunities, promote opportunities them to take advantage of those new opportunities. And so it's both policy and environmental change, and then also promotion of those changes that we've made. I can only speak for weighing in. What we try to do is to connect individuals and connect organizations in the Kansas City area. We're by far not the only group doing that type of work, but we're one of those organizations. And so if you're not already a partner of Weighing In, I hope you become a partner. We will share that information with you in a follow-up email that we'll be sending. We've got some standing working groups related to early childhood, to schools. We will soon be launching a built environment and policy work group, and those are great ways to be actively involved with other stakeholders working in a specific sector. So I hope you join us if you haven't already done that. As I mentioned, in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we'll be sending up a follow-up email to all conference attendees. That will include information or a reminder that our PowerPoint presentations are available on the website. Recordings of the presentations should be available in a couple weeks that you can view, download or view on our websites. And likewise, all of the resources that we've been talking about, whether it's the systems map that I talked about, the physical activity, National Physical Activity Plan that Dr. Cole mentioned today, some of the publications that people have talked about, those will all be available on our website as well. There are a couple key things that we're missing from this conference, and these have been called out already. We had, while it was present in most sessions, there was no dedicated session to equity, to health equity, and I think that is probably one of the biggest missing components of what the work in childhood obesity in Kansas City is, and so that's something that we need to improve on. We also didn't have any representation from faith-based organizations, businesses. We didn't have any sports and recreation organizations. These are all obviously very important players in childhood obesity, and so we need to continue to work to engage those people. So I hope you've made some good connections at this meeting. I hope you've learned a lot, and I hope you've been empowered by the call to action that our speakers have presented with us today in the past couple days. And so I think I'd like to end by just bringing Dr. Salas up and letting him give just 1 or 2 thoughts or closing remarks before we end today.
I've appreciated being here and participating in this, getting to know some of you and learning a fair amount about what you've been doing. I think the main thing I want to say is thank you, all of you, for your commitment and work to making kids healthier. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's the big mission, and all of you are doing really good things. But despite that, of course, it's not enough. And it's not good enough, and we always have to strive to get better. And one of the ways of getting better is learning from each other. I love the connection here between all the practices going on and all the groups and all the settings that you're working in, along with some academics. And it's really important to bring academics, practitioners, policymakers together, because we don't understand the strengths and of each other, and we don't, and we can all learn from each other. And I hope that's happened. I think that's happened in the past couple of days. So that's very important. I'm just going to take a pause before I say my last comments to give a brief commercial. And that is, I would invite you to at least consider coming to our Active Living conference that will be in February, and it will be in Charleston, South Carolina. And it is another place where you will find researchers, because it came out of active living research, but also practitioners and policymakers. So a quite similar mix as here, but from all across the country and from a few other countries. And we have both research presentations and practice presentations. So you can present things that you're doing. And practice presentations don't require fancy data, but we find them to be very thought-provoking and educational for the researchers to see what the practitioners are doing, and hopefully practitioners and policy people will learn something useful from the research, and as I hope you did here. Okay, so back to my, activelivingresearch.org, and we'll put a link on the website for this conference. The last thing, as I said, we always need to get better. So we learn from each other, and how we get better is getting good ideas, and hopefully you got some good ideas here, and then testing them out. As a researcher, that's what research is all about. So that's why we think if we know things that we've proven things that work, we want to get them out there and widely used. That's a constant struggle and goal. But for people in practice, we would love you to adopt and adapt evidence-based strategies, but you have your own ideas. And you have your own innovations, and things bubble up from the community and are tailored to the communities that you're working with. And in those cases, we all would benefit by you doing some evaluation of that. And what's working about your initiatives, what's not working, because that's how we improve, by asking those questions. The other thing maybe to think about for the future is so many organizations are here, and I said at the end of yesterday, that's really a strength. You've got a lot of great partners, and many organizations, so that's fantastic. But maybe a next step here is to really make it a more collective action. And for this a group, the weighing in partners, to maybe come to a consensus about what could be a theme or a campaign or a common goal that we could put some of our energy to, in addition to all of our separate activities. And so that way you might be able to make one big change a year that would not be possible with each of your organizations working separately. So I'll leave that as the food for thought, and thank you for your attendance and all the work you've done. Thanks to Robin, all the sponsors, and all the staff that put these together. So we'll give a final active applause of this meeting for everybody.
What a great way to end. Please fill out evaluation forms and leave it on the table before you leave. Thanks and travel safe.